Hey everyone, welcome back to some Blood Crest Manor content, and today I want to be showing you guys an interesting thing I found at the dollar store, or Dollar Tree better said, which is this here. It's a little toy, glow-in-the-dark plastic knife, maybe like some sort of pirate detail on the handle. $1.25. They sell this in a sickle, in a cleaver, and in a machete, and in this exaggerated knife style. For the video though, I'm going to be showing you how I take one of these knives and I turn it into a prop that's worthy of a haunted house using paper clay and paper mache. As it is, for $1.25, that ain't bad, just so you know. But overall, for like a haunted house though, it's nowhere near par what it's going to need to be. So hang out with me for a minute, guys, and I'm going to show you just how I turn this into something really worth having. Boo! Alright everyone, now that you have your dollar store knife, we want to begin with the first process of getting this thing wrapped up. So all you'll need for that is some newspaper and some masking tape. Basically, you just want to make sure it's covered from the top to the bottom. The paper clay will not stick to the knife without it. The good rule of thumb with paper clay is that paper wants to stick to paper. But if you put it on this knife as it is, it will just slide right off. So I always start from the hilt. It just seems to go better that way. I just get me a few pieces of tape and I get me the newspaper to fit around it, and I just start wrapping it up. You want as much newspaper showing as possible, but you also don't want it to ever fall off. So enough tape to make it where it won't fall off or it won't bulge up on you from when you put the paper clay on, but you definitely don't want it wrapped in nothing but tape. Alright everyone, so for the next stage we're going to be putting on the paper clay and the paper mache paste. If you don't already have these made, you're definitely going to need to get them made. I'm going to have a link in the description below with a video where I show you just how to do this. But anyway, assuming you already have all this ready, all you're going to need to do now is start at the hilt. You're just going to put your paper clay on first. Pat it down with your thumb and your hand as smooth as you can. You don't want any like textures or lumps or fat pieces in it. If you find any plastic pieces, if you make your paper clay like I do, you definitely don't want those in it either. So just pick them out as you go. But so you'll go all the way down to where the handle ends and the blade begins, and then you're going to take your paper mache paste and you're going to brush it down smooth. This will create a nice smooth finish. It will make it look more as it should instead of more like clay molded. Without this paper mache paste on top of it, it will have like this texture of like fingerprints, but you should be able to get it down smooth with that. But alright, so what I do from here is I let that dry overnight. Typically what I'll do is I'll just set the blade onto the table and set something on the blade so that the handle is free floating in the air. Overnight should do you, 24 hours preferred. And then what you're going to do next is, once it's dry, you're just going to do the same thing to the blade of it. You're just going to put it all the way up to the top, patting it down as smooth as you can. The one thing you want to watch out for is your newspaper might want to come off of the blade itself. It just doesn't want to stick as good as you would like it to. If that happens, just try to push it down with your finger as best you can. You'll notice as you put your finger to it, the paper clay will stick to your finger and try to pull against it a little bit. Just try to push it down and roll your finger away from it so that way it stays down. Once you do this though, you're going to try to make the blade, the sharpness of it, with your finger just by pinching it all the way up. as you go all the way up to the tip, and then that will create that that edge effect to it. And then once we get all the clay onto it, we'll be putting on the paper mache as well. Now, as far as the drying of the blade goes, that's something that's a little bit different. At first, I thought the best thing to do would be to hang it upside down using some paracord, and that way it would be hanging from the handle and it wouldn't be touching any. You don't want this paper clay touching anything while it's wet. It will pull it off, guaranteed. So I tried that first, and it turned out to where the blade was just too heavy with all the mache and all the paper clay on it. So what I ended up having to do was take 2 pieces of wood and a couple of plastic clamps, and I also got those from the dollar store as well. And you just clamp that in and with the handle inside the wood, and it'll stand the knife straight up for you. And this way you can let it dry overnight just like that, and then it should be fine. It won't come off, anything like that. You should be able to take it out of the clamp if you want. But once again, I always recommend more of like a 24-hour dry. It just seems to do a little bit better. But to each their own. Alright everyone, so now that we have it all painted down and looking like we want it, the edge is out, the tip is pointy, everything is ready. It's going to sit inside the wooden clamp for a night, and then after that it's going to take about 5 to 7 days to dry completely. You do not want to do this next step until you make sure it is completely dry. So the next step is the spar varnish, which is a marine grade varnish. It will be our first layer of waterproofing. And so what we'll do is with a brush or a sponge brush, you're just going to put it onto the blade first, a little bit down to the handle. Once you do that, I recommend hanging it upside down from a paracord from the part that's dry and not been spar varnished yet. And then once that's dried for 24 hours, you're just going to take that little part of the handle that wasn't painted yet, and you're going to do that and then let it free float over a table while you just set it down, just like you're seeing here. Alright, so once your spar varnish has had a chance to dry, you're basically going to do the same thing with black exterior paint, and this will be your second layer of waterproofing. Same steps as the spar varnish, just with black exterior. For this next step though, we're going to be doing some dry brushing. Dry brushing, what you do is you just put a little bit of paint on an older brush, or it can be a new brush, doesn't matter. And you basically paint it out to where it's dry onto the brush. Basically, you take a piece of paper, you rub it against the paper until it's almost out, and then you throw it against the blade, the prop you're working on. In this case, what happens is as you're brushing over it, the raised areas get the paint, while the lower areas stay black and other colors that you put on, like in this case brown. So what I'm doing is just a light brown onto the blade of it and a heavy brown onto the handle. The handle will stay brown, that's the color I want it. If you wanted a different color, you can certainly do that. But for me, just a brown handle works. Once you get a light coating onto the handle, onto the blade, you just take your little fan like this, and it'll get it dry for you really fast. The one thing about dry brushing is you gotta move kind of quickly because it will dry onto your brush if you're not careful. But you can do all of this in the same day. Basically now for what we're doing, I take me some pewter color, and I dry brush it onto the blade. A little bit heavier than I do on the brown. The brown is just to create a little bit of breakup in the color of the pewter and the black, and it helps create more of like an old rusty blade kind of look. But so once you get that on, you want to make sure it's on a decent amount. You just don't want to put it on too heavy because then you'll lose all that black on the underside of it, and that really adds a cool effect. Alright guys, on this next step, it's a little bit optional if you want to do this. If not, you know, it's fine too. If you like how the blade looks right now, then by all means keep it like that. But for me, I like to take me some red paint and a stiff brush, and I like to do a little blood splatter to it. It really just helps the blade pop, in my opinion. It gives it some life, and it helps break up some of these duller colors with more of a brighter color to it. You don't want to overdo it. In my opinion, you can easily overdo this. What I like to do is I like to just dip my brush into it, kind of like brush it off just a little bit, and then take my hand and just flick it with my hand onto it. And as you'll see, it starts off a little bit thick and then it ends up being kind of smaller and droplet size. And all this does, like I said, is just adds a nice breakup to the color. Alright guys, so once your blade has dried from the spar varnish, you are now ready for your final step in this, which will also be your final stage of waterproofing and sunproofing. Basically what I do is I spray it with a satin finish. It's by Karl. I'm sure there's other brands you can use, but I just simply like the Karl myself. I have more experience with it. I go with a satin finish on these, so that way the metal still has like, or at least what looks like the metal of the blade has still like a sheen to it. That way, you know, if it's at night, it'll have like a slight reflectiveness to it, but I don't want it to be glossy like the spar varnish leaves it. So definitely do it with this Karl finish. It'll give you a nice color for it, and I think you'll be really happy with what you get. Alright everyone, and just like that, once you've used your spray finish on your knife, you are left with this. Something that is not too shiny, not too dull, has a really cool black and brown handle with your pewter blade, and nothing about the spar varnish or about the spray makes it to where it dilutes it anyway, you know. So it all looks good. It's now ready, and as you'll see, it actually has a really good bit of strength to it. Once you get done with this, you'll see that these props really have a lot of durability. You know, you can drop them, slash with them, take plenty of pictures with them, and handling it too, it shouldn't wear out any of this paint. Over time, it should just be fine. As far as how long I think it will hold like this, it's really hard to say. It could last anywhere from a few years to 20 years plus. I'm going to be watching them very closely. What I'm going to be looking for most is this handle. If it's going to break anywhere, it'll be right here on this handle where the handle connects to the blade. The handle on the toy itself is not connected to the blade, it's more of inserted. And as you'll see, when you have it, it'll actually wobble when you have it in its first form as like just a plastic toy. With that being said, when I start, I always try to make sure there's a good bit of paper / tape right there. Not enough to bulge it out, but just enough to make sure that it ain't going to go nowhere. The clay and then the spar varnish and the paint. The rest of that all really just kind of binds it in together, and after that, it shouldn't be going anywhere. You might find some fading on your handle depending on how much you're using it. If you ever see that you're starting to have some sort of paint issue with that, just hit it up with a little bit of acrylic paint, spray finish it again, and you should be good to go. But other than that, guys, that is how we successfully turned a dollar store toy into a haunt worth prop. If you have any questions or issues, definitely let me know in the comments below. I'll be happy to hear what you think, or if you have any questions for like making it yourself, I'll do my best to answer them all. But until next time, guys, I'll be seeing you later. Boo!